Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today for this week's Friday Focus. Friday Focus is our online lunchtime talk series that we host at the Hunterian, and each week on a Friday we have a different talk from a different speaker. We tend to cover topics around our exhibitions, the work that goes into them, themes that are coming out of them, the works and artists that are showcased, as well as research that happens at the Hunterian and across the University of Glasgow, and also, of course, all the work that happens behind the scenes with our collections. So this week, I'm joined by my wonderful colleague, Lola Sanchez, who is art curator at the Hunterian. And Lola's going to talk to us a bit about the works on paper in the Hunterian collection and all the work that's gone into bringing more of these artworks onto public display in our gallery over the past year. So thank you everyone for joining us. There'll be time at the end for any questions. You can pop them in the chat as we go through, and I will read them out at the end, or you're welcome to take yourselves off mute. So I will just hand over to Lola now to present this week's talk.
Okay, thank you, Eleni. Can you hear me well? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining me in this Friday Focus. And like Eleni said, I'm going to talk to you about the work that has been going on in the Hunterian Art Gallery over the past year. And to do that, I'm going to go back past in time for a while to the moment when we reopened the gallery to our audiences back in April 2023. And that was the moment when we were presenting new narratives, new thinking about our collections, and new displays. But part of the brief of the project was more than that. We wanted to be more experimental. We wanted to be more open to new ways of working. And that was an element that we managed to reflect in the galleries in the way that I'm going to present to you. Together with that, also part of that brief and ambition was to include works that show the strength of the collection. Works from other areas, not just the art collection, but also works from the art collection that were our strength. And when it comes to the Hunterian art collection, the strength is obviously, or one of the main ones, is the collections of work on paper. The work on papers are amount up to about 40,000 works, and I'm showing you here on the right-hand side a snapshot of one of our stores where you see the compactux with all these shelves and cylinder boxes that are packed and filled in with works on paper. So a rich collection, a vast collection that encompasses works from the 15th to the 21st century that is not always easy to display. And that is because several reasons. One of them is because works on paper and the pigment that is used in watercolors are organic materials, and they react obviously to temperature and humidity, but most importantly, they are very fragile to light. The works on paper required a very specific levels of light exposure, normally 50 luxes, and they cannot be displayed for a long period of times. So we tend usually to display them for a maximum of 3 or 4 months normally. So that makes things very complicated. On top of that, I should take the chance now to mention that the work and the labor that entails to bring up a work on paper is complicated. It involves a paper conservator who has to assess the condition and make any remedial work on the material of the paper. It also includes the work of art technician who has to put the work in the frame, the paper conservator to map the work, collections management to move the works. So it's a lot of people and a lot of effort, joined team effort to make things happen and make things appear in the world. If we put all this together, then that involves that displaying works on paper require a certain amount of time, at which point we have to deinstall and bring up another one. And that's why we call these rotations. To make this happen, we had to go through a process and make a commitment and agreement between all the members of the team that we wanted to do that for our visitors and for our collection. So that's something that I always like to insist on. But then the other brief of the project was also to bring in works from other areas of the collection. Now, that doesn't mean that they are not also light sensitive. So the works that I'm displaying here come from the collection of the world cultures, like these aprons, or from the natural history collections, from the decorative art collection, and all of them are made of materials that are light sensitive, which means that, again, these works have to change, have to swap after a number of time. Now, another problem is that we don't have a specific devoted space in the Hunterian Art Gallery to display these kind of works that can meet these requirements. So it means that we need to make some adjustments. And sometimes it's not that easy, and especially going into some conservation, some states requirements. But so we came to the decision that the best way to do that would be to identify specific spots in the gallery where we would display these works and swap them and change them every time that it was needed. So every 3 or 4 months, the 12th spot that you see marked across the gallery changed the display. And that allows us not just to change those displays, but also to, from a curatorial perspective, to delve deeper in the themes. Now, the challenge sometimes is that if you want to display a work on paper and a painting, for example, in close proximity, it presents a lot of challenges in terms of lighting. Works on paper, as I said, are allowed a maximum of 50 luxes, whereas paintings could go up to 200 luxes. So the decision is whether you go for one or the other. Anyway, if we go back to some of these spots, I'm going to show to you, I'm going to present to you some of these examples of what the work that we do and what we can do with these rotations. So for example, in this room where we touch in the theme of art making techniques and processes of artists and materials, we have a large case, as you see here, that allow us to display not just one work, but several works on paper. And that blends to the possibility to create a mini exhibition, like a sub-theme within the wider theme of the room. And here are some examples of such rotation. On the top row of this slide, you see the rotation that took place from April to July 2023. And on that occasion, we displayed 3 works on paper, 3 prints depicting images of artist studios, artist academies, where we could explore the method, the training methods, the training techniques for these artists, and all dating to the 16th and the 17th century. A few months later, in between January and April 2024, we had the opportunity to display works on paper, sketches, studies, preparatory drawings that the artist Marie-Louise von Motesitsky created, different steps in their creative process to come finally to the production of the painting After the Ball. So the opportunity to see all them together in the context of this room allow us to talk about other questions that we couldn't do normally. Similarly, also in that room, we swap again and explore the question around botanical art and botanical illustration, the differences. And we did that through using works by Charles René Mackintosh, a botanical chart, teaching chart used at the University of Glasgow, or Japanese watercolors, botanical watercolors. Now, in other instances, we only swap one work, and this is the case for the room that we call the Modern Gallery in this space here. We have only one work that we swap, but we have to meet other requirements because the works in this room have to be produced between the decades of the 1960s and 1980s. So what we do in this case is that we have the opportunity to showcase an area of the collection where we have a strength, British 20th century works on paper, and we explore different techniques. This is a moment where the techniques in printmaking explode and offer very different possibilities. So we have some of them here. And at the moment, what we have on the wall is this work by Barbara Ray, January Query. In other spaces, in other spots, like here in the Canon room, we have this case where we do rotate not only works that are sensitive to the light exposure, but also works from other collections. So we had the chance to include recently a Greek vase, but we have in the past been able to display books and beetles that we keep displaying. So in this case, what we have there is the opportunity to bring in works from other collections that, again, we can change. Now, the interesting thing about the rotation is that even though it has been, it's a huge effort, it is kind of developing in new directions. Whether they are sustainable or not is another matter. But what is happening is that we realize that it also was an opportunity to showcase new acquisitions. And that's what I'm showing you in the screen. In this instance, what you have here is a slide showing a work by Una Shanks. And right near to it is a painting by Duncan Shanks, her husband. And this is a painting from our collection. It's called Night Garden. But the watercolor was a new acquisition, and is, as a matter of fact, they made a very nice juxtaposition, but it's also the first work by Una Shanks acquired by a public collection in Scotland. So we're very happy, and having the chance to show that and share that with our audience is something that is really encouraging from these rotations. In the same line of thinking, we had the opportunity to display another new acquisition by another woman, a Scottish woman, Alison Watt, the painting Capra. And in this instance, it was even more interesting in the way that we were able to work with the artists. We invited a group of curators, my colleague Angelo and myself, were working hand in hand with Alison to walk through the stores and identify works that she felt that could speak or resonate in a special way with her work. So we were able to introduce these works that you see in the screen, Bridget Riley work on paper, and to drawings by Beatrix Whistler that Alison Watt felt that were very special, had special meaning to be displayed nearby to her painting. So again, a new opportunity to use our space in a different way to showcase more works. And finally, I want to talk to you about this space, which is the room that we call Art and Light, Art and Science. And in the back, at the rear end of this room, we have a large case where we can display, again, works on paper. It allows us to display about 4 or 5, depending on the size, works on paper. But what I want to share with you is another way in which we can explore these rotations, which is by showcasing and supporting university teaching. We are a university museum at the end of the day, and our aspiration, one of the things that we do, is to work with our academic community. And one of the opportunities that the rotation has offered to us is the opportunity to work with colleagues and be able to use the gallery to showcase the work that is going on in the lecture theatre. In this instance, what happened was I was working with the Center for Gender History back in 2022, right in the middle of the pandemic, a lot of challenges, and we had a conversation around the themes that they were exploring about representations of women in art, and how the representations of women in art can speak so much about the questions that they were discussing in this course. So we agreed to organize a session at our research rooms, study center at Kelvin Hall, which is open to everybody at the University of Glasgow and our public with enough notice. So we pulled out those works and we created a series of activities. So together with these students, we came about with a selection of works. And we have had all these works that we were talking and discussing and exploring. And after that session, the students helped me to refine and come up with a narrative. And this is what you can see now if you go to the gallery. This is the rotation that has been the result of a co-working, collaboration, co-creating with these students and the conveners of the course. Now, the title of the rotation that the students decided to give it to this was No More Nice Girls. And what it's trying to do is to represent from from a wide range of representations from the 15th, from the 16th century to the 19th century, how women have been represented in art, and more specifically, bad women. So in the center of the image, we have really the origin of it all, if you want, the biblical origin of it all, with one of the most famous representations by Dürer. This is Adam and Eve, produced in 1503. And of course, in terms of women representation, this is the moment when women embodied by the figure of Eve are the tempting and succumbed to the evil, and they produce the fall of a man. When all the sins came to the world, and all the problems, and all the mortality of the human beings, and how the Judeo-Christian tradition have this strong connection and this view of women and the role that women played. Now, very close to it, there's this depiction of Israel van Mechem, the angry wife, or the fight for the pants. And this is an interesting moment in medieval times, and Israel van Mechem produced other 6 prints of couples, fighting couples. And in this particular case, you can see how the man is trying to reach with his hand the pants, and it's about the power in the household. And we have these very bad women who's just beating him, and this tension there. Nearby, this is this depiction of Judith with the head of Holofernes by Agostino Carracci. This is a 16th century depiction, and Judith became one of those biblical figures where it evolved in the depiction of our history and also in society. Whereas in Renaissance times and medieval times, she was desexualized. And the violence in the images, as you can tell from her face, she seems very calm. She just has decapitated somebody who seems to be also very relaxed. So the violence here is really not there, but it would evolve, and with time, the theme of Judith will bring to their history some of the most emblematical depictions of women, rebel, aggressive women. So for some time she was a heroine and liberating her people by decapitating the general Holofernes. But then in representations like the paintings by Artemisia Gentileschi, where she is depicting this scene of Judith decapitating Holofernes in a very wild and bloody way, it takes a very different approach, where women is increasingly becoming more aggressive. This depiction of Georges de Fer is inspired by the poems of Baudelaire, La Source de Mal, where the women in France and in Europe at the fin de siècle become all these very mysterious animal, for the symbolist, very scary, with embodying all the fears of the men because of the sexual liberation, because of the freedom. So this is all representing her like a seductive, tempting woman. And similarly, about the same time, the second half of the 19th century, we have this depiction by Grasset, the acid thrower. And this is inspired by a series of events that were reported by the sensationalist press in France, by which women were accused, some women were accused of throwing acid to other women, scorned women, because of they were jealously to disfigure their faces. The reality was that it was actually the same number of men than women, although we know that it still happens in the world. And the interesting thing here is how Grasset is using the red color and the horned shape of the hair of the woman. And we also had, and so the evil in her face, eerie, greenish face, is very interesting. We were also having a lot of discussions with the students at this point about how she is depicted with green skin and thinking about witches and the depiction of witches. So that was part of the conversation. And I think that's me.
Thank you, Lola. That was brilliant. It's really nice to hear about how kind of the system of rotations is allowing us to bring new works into conversation with each other. I had a question, and if anybody else has got questions, you are welcome to pop them in the chat or pop your hand up. I've just got a question around now that we've done this and we've implemented the system of rotations over the past year, kind of how many works have come out onto display thanks to this?
That's very good. I think that is something about 140 works that have been swapping and rotating over the past year. So we have had 4 different rotations and about 140 works. So it's the equivalent to a large exhibition that we would normally have in the Hunterian. Yeah.
Is quite impressive. I also wondered actually, so these spaces that, for example, we looked at the case in the art making room. I wonder if now with the system of the rotation in place and these display cases, if that kind of influences the way that we continue collecting and if this comes into our way of thinking when we're collecting works.
Yeah, sure. So that will be again an opportunity to showcase the new acquisition. We just finished to write the new developments policy, where we are reviewing all the criteria and know that the next future rotations will be able to include some of us. As a matter of fact, I already know that some of the people who's working in the next rotations are thinking about doing it.
So Steph's question is, can you reflect on how Artemisia's depiction of Judith, a woman artist, changed perceptions of Judith?
Well, obviously, in the case of Carracci, if you compare it with Artemisia Gentileschi, it's a completely wild different. In the particular case of Artemisia Gentileschi painting, it has more stronger connotations, as she is actually depicting the man who raped her. So the way that she's using that painting and the figure of Judith is really using that to in a way of trying to do what she could in painting, what she couldn't do in real life, and taking her revenge. So I suppose that was something very therapeutical for her. Yes, so the figure of, interestingly, the figure of Judith has not been extensively used in the 20th century, but it was a very powerful symbol for a long time.
Thanks, Lola. I have one more question just around kind of the theming of the rotations and how that comes about. So obviously the one that's in at the minute, in the case that we showed, the No More Nice Girls, is a result of teaching and research with students. But I wondered if you, when we're working on these rotations, if you start with a theme or if you start with a work, or like how does it develop?
In that particular case, I was thinking about themes. And the first rotation was about motherhood. And so it's very much one of the things that we are doing in the gallery is reviewing or having a look to the gender, questions of gender issues. And that is something that we not always can do with paintings, but works on paper tend to be much more, they cover many more themes and more complex, and there's more work to choose. So questions like gender are something that I was very keen in exploring with works on paper. And in that large case, the first one, I wanted to talk about motherhood and ideas of motherhood, similar to what the students did about representations of bad women. We did that with motherhood. there again, another rotation was about the theme, but that was based in the painting that is hanging nearby that case, which is the Les Œufs by John Ferguson, and we have 2 sketches in preparation for that painting, and we used those sketches and because they were, and then we made it all around the theme of dancing, and we used the theme of dancing also for other works in the modern gallery, where we also depicted included depictions of dancers, Nureyev print, for example. So it's mostly thematic.
Brilliant, thank you. And finally, Lola, just with the works that's in at the minute, when do those change over, just for anyone who's wondering when they can get out and come and see it?
They will be on view until January, I believe. So it will be sometime at the end of January when they will go down.
Brilliant. Thank you for today's talk, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope that has inspired you to come back to the Hunterian for many a visit, as the works are continually changing.